It's time to accelerate. Hi, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Join me as I host conversations with the leading experts in sales, marketing, sales automation, sales process, leadership, management, training, coaching, any resource that I believe to help you accelerate the growth of your sales, your business, and most importantly, you. Hello, and welcome to Accelerate. I am excited to talk with my guest today. Joining me is Klein. Craig is the founder and CEO of Sales Nexus, an integrated CRM, marketing automation, lead generation platform targeted for mid-sized and smaller businesses. Craig, welcome to Accelerate.
Thanks, Andy. Great to be here.
Well, thanks for joining me. And you're joining us from where today?
I'm in Houston, Texas.
Houston, Texas. Okay. Right in the middle of summer.
Yeah.
Hot and humid today?
Well, actually, we're about to get a deluge, it looks like.
Actually, yeah, I'm in my New York studio today, and it's, we've been hot and humid, and I'm hoping for rain as well for the same thing. Cool down a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so maybe take a minute, fill out that brief introduction I gave. Tell us about yourself, maybe how you got your start in sales.
Sure, yeah. I was an engineer, actually. That was my education. And I spent about a year working at NASA here in Houston, right out of school, and I just hated it. I hated the bureaucracy and it just wasn't my thing. And so
Were you working on an interesting project though?
Well, yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a blast, actually. You know, it was when they were sending up the shuttles about every 6 months back then.
Right.
You know, back in the late '80s, early '90s, and my group was responsible for the networking, the computer networks in the Mission Control Center. So when the shuttles were in the air, then we were on call. We were in the Mission Control Center. It was fun. That part was very exciting. But the 6 months in between flights was extremely tedious.
Okay. Fair enough.
So anyway, I left there, took a flyer and started a business with a friend of mine in the construction industry. And that was kind of a disaster. I learned a few things sort of the hard way. But from there, I took a job in sales kind of because I had to. I needed a job, right? And did really well and never looked back, really. I started selling computer controllers for car washes. So like as your car moves through the...
That's very specialized.
Yeah. So these guys had a really innovative product that was kind of one of a kind. So I was sort of right place, right time, but did real well. And
what was the value proposition on that?
Well, you know, it was really the first computerized way to control your car wash. So everybody else was doing it with, you know, analog electrical switches and things like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they were wasting lots of soap and water was the big thing.
So you're controlling the water and the soap. Was it controlling the pace of cars through it as well?
No, that's a whole other, because that infrastructure or that equipment is very expensive to change. So, you know, they didn't want to change that.
Very cool. Okay. So when did you start Sales Nexus?
Well, so I went from the car wash business into the energy business. So here in Houston, I work for a couple of different energy service companies, and you know, I always knew that I wanted to start my own business, but I didn't know what it was going to be. You know, and I was just sort of waiting for inspiration to strike. And then the last company in the energy business that I worked for, I had earned a little bit of equity, and they were acquired, and so I had a windfall, and it was kind of like, all right, if there's ever going to be a time, it's now.
Right.
And so as a consumer, I was a VP of sales, you know, and so as a consumer of CRMs, I felt like there was a way to build a better mousetrap.
What were you using that time in your work?
Well, I had used ACT, you know,
right.
Remember ACT?
Oh, yeah.
I had used ACT for ages, you know, really when I first got started in sales. And then this was around 99, 2000.
Mm-hmm.
Salesforce had just come out, right? So we had just recently transitioned from ACT to Salesforce. And, at the time, Salesforce was new and relatively immature.
Right.
And so we just missed a lot of the rich functionality that you had in ACT. But obviously we were benefiting from being online and things like that. And so that was kind of the original vision, we were actually the first company to offer an online way to have the total ACT experience on the web.
Got it. It's sort of interesting. So if you look back at today, from today's perspective, given all this competition that's come into the CRM space,
yeah,
would you have made the same decision about starting that particular company?
Yeah, that's a great question. The other part I didn't mention is that the other part of our vision was to mobilize the experience, right? So in the very beginning, we spent a lot of money and time developing mobile apps, and this is before the iPhone, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, what were they running on?
It was before even BlackBerry was that popular. The most popular PDA, they called them back then, was the Palm devices, right?
Right. Yeah,
and so the Palm Treo had just come out, which was the first sort of
phone
cellular
PDA,
right?
Yeah.
And so that's where we made all our apps work on that device. And, we were ahead of our time. There was no question about that. And then, of course, once we got everything working basically on that at the time, it was somewhat limited infrastructure back then. Then BlackBerry and iPhone really started to take off, and the Treo just completely died. And back then, porting mobile apps from one device to another, that was it's like starting over.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So, we made a strategic decision, which I kick myself every time I think about it. So thanks for making me think about it.
You're welcome.
We decided to put the mobile part of things on the back burner and just focus on the web part of things. Which if we had stayed focused on that, obviously we would have been a first mover as the iPhone really started to come to the fore, and God knows where that would have led.
Well, of course, from my perspective, I don't see a lot of really powerful, broadly used mobile apps for sales.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
So, I mean, on the other hand, you might still be pushing a noodle up a hill on that, because it's, that's still, to me, sort of the holy grail is what's really that killer app for sales on mobile. There's certainly, we need LinkedIn. We use that. We use, Salesforce, other things that, are part of CRM and so on. But it seems like we're still missing that real killer app that for sales reps that really help them become more productive. That's mobile.
Yeah. Well, it's tough, right? Because salespeople are salespeople, and the killer app for a salesperson is basically, I just want to be able to talk to customers and do what I do, and somehow or another through the ether, everything, all the data that needs to be collected about that conversation just ends up in the right places, right?
Yeah. I mean, certainly if you could offload some of that, the bureaucratic, updating Salesforce, which, obviously some systems do that automatically now, but take some of that, but that frees up time. To me, it's still like, okay, what's the app that's going to, and I don't know the answer to this, it's going to help that rep do a better job in front of the prospect, with the prospect.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that the easy thing that anybody can do with really just about any CRM tool that they're using today is just kind of using the CRM as a way to structure the conversation and make sure they remember to ask the right questions, right? And don't get distracted. That's sort of the 80%, 80% of the battle, right? Mm-hmm. For most salespeople, they'll get off message and go down rabbit holes. And then they get back to the office, and the sales manager says, "Okay, so what about this, this, and this?" And he's like, "Oh, I never asked those questions." Right?
Well, is that really what you would use CRM tool for? I mean, people increasingly, at least based on conversations I have with folks, is perceiving CRM and I'll say this primarily about Salesforce, since maybe it's more true at a larger enterprise customer, is that it's really just like this repository of data. But now we're seeing these layers of tools, being sales technology tools, they're being layered on top of that, whether for sales development reps or account-based selling or what have you, that provide a little more for the reps. I mean, now predictive analytics systems that sit on top of it that supposedly help you determine who you should be calling when and what you should be saying and so on. What do you see in your end of the market? I mean, so you focus primarily on the small and mid-sized businesses. You've been in this business longer than almost everybody else. What are you seeing as the real trends in terms of, let's say, adoption even? Because so often, CRM, it's like table stakes, right? For sales, somebody, we'll go get a CRM system, but then they think that's it. They think the job is done. Management, sales, that's all you need.
Right. Yeah, no, that's the thing that's amazing about this industry, with all of the technology that's come out, and like you mentioned, and some of the really cool tools that are now coming into the market. The thing that's always been the Achilles heel is still the Achilles heel. The number one reason a CRM implementation fails is that the salespeople don't adopt it, and it's been about a 50% failure rate based on that from day one, and it still is today. So that's where I don't really think it's about technology. That's the bottom line. That's the 10-ton gorilla in the room.
Well, people don't. I mean, is it still that salespeople hate sort of the command and control aspect of CRM?
Well, first of all, I think that's a little bit of a myth, right?
Okay.
I think most salespeople, in my experience, in fact, I'll tell you a quick little story. So when we implemented Salesforce in the energy business that I was mentioning earlier, we had a small sales team. It was about 10 guys, right? And we had this one guy who was, he had been in the industry forever, and he knew everyone and just had all these great relationships. And he always did probably 40 to 50% of our revenue every year, right? Mm-hmm. The other guys were just trying to be like him, right? And but he was an older guy, and he was the one who was like, I'm not going to sit there at the computer typing all this stuff in there. So we went way out of our way, and we hired a girl to sit down with him every morning and go, tell me what happened yesterday. And she would go put it all in Salesforce, right? So at least it worked so that as a team, we could go and we could run reports and everything was consistent, right? Because if we didn't have 50% of our business in there, it would be worthless.
Right.
So what happened, though, what was amazing is that where Joe initially said that, he said, man, I'm not doing that, right? As soon as he saw what the other guys were doing with the tool, he comes to me and he says, hey, I want to get into this and start doing what those guys are doing, right? In other words, the reason Joe was so successful as a top producer was because he was all about exploiting any opportunity that he could find to be better at targeting the right customer at the right time, knowing what to say, knowing what the strategy is, all of that, right? And as soon as he saw that these other guys were leveraging, at the time, this was Salesforce, to do that, then he wanted on board, right? So my point really is just that I think that the fundamental failure is that management never really sells the thing to the salespeople, right? They just don't understand how it's going to benefit them. And so why would they get on board? Yeah,
unless they're forced to.
Exactly.
Yeah, which is probably the case, as you said, in most instances. So what do you see with your customers? In your space, I mean, you were a pioneer, absolutely a pioneer with Sales Nexus. Now there's more competitors. I mean, how do you position yourself, let's say, against a Salesforce when you're talking to a small, mid-sized company? How do you position yourself against some of the other, perhaps larger players, even Microsoft with Dynamics and so on?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think sometimes I think I'm kind of crazy because I seem to always take the hardest possible path. But what we've done is we've put ourselves right in the middle of the, sort of the ancient war between the sales department and the marketing department, right?
Okay.
Often in large companies and in small companies, what happens in the marketing side of the house gets thrown over the wall to the sales side of the house, and there's not a whole lot of back and forth there, right?
No, yeah. Don't bother me with those marketing leads.
Yeah. So, the problem, of course, is that when you in the technology environment that's out there today, it's been built to sort of recognizing that fact, right? So you got sales tools, you got your CRM and other sales tools, and then you've got marketing tools, and the marketing folks buy the marketing tools and the sales folks buy the sales tools. And sure, they have some ways that you can plug those things together and information can flow back and forth. But in reality, it's not all that seamless, and it's not all that automatic. And like you just alluded to, a lot of times the leads that the marketing folks are sending over to the salespeople have a bad rap, and the salespeople just ignore them. And unfortunately, what it does is it puts all of those folks kind of in the IT business when none of them really want to be, right?
Right.
Somebody's got to be sitting there making sure all this stuff's working. So there's a lot of challenges. What I see is a lot of companies, big and small, that have invested in the Salesforce and Marketo or Eloqua and all the really high-end solutions, and they may have 2 or 3 people working full time just to run the technology, right? Support folks, and they struggle to actually show an ROI on the whole thing, right? To prove that it's paying for itself. So that's what we've done is we've put together the basics of marketing automation. I'm not going to claim that we compete with Eloqua or Marketo in terms of features from top to bottom, because we don't. But we've taken the basics and we've baked it into the CRM so that a smaller business with maybe 10 to 100 salespeople, and maybe they only got like one marketing person, 1 or 2 marketing people, and they're wearing lots of hats and they don't have a lot of time, that they can use marketing automation in a way that's just generic or organic to the sales process. It's a no-brainer when you think about it. Most sales organizations are terrible at managing their leads, right?
Right.
They're churning through leads every month, and the ones that don't buy just literally get thrown over the side and forgotten about.
Yeah, no nurturing, you're saying.
And if that's all you do is just take those leads and put them on some simple little nurturing program, typically it's going to yield a 15 to 25% increase in sales within 6 to 12 months. That's what we've seen.
Right.
And it's just, it works every time it's tried. It's just that, salespeople, number one, you don't want them sitting down and writing your lead nurturing emails, right? So
generally, yes, that's correct.
It's got to be super brain dead easy from a technology point of view, where the salespeople kind of don't even know it's happening; it just happens. And then you've got to help them get the messaging right, and that's something that we've always done differently. We've always, a lot of our competitors will farm the implementation work out to like a certified consultant network. We've always done that internally because we know that really to get it right, customers need more than just IT help. They need, marketing help. They need sales process help and that kind of thing.
Okay. So that's something you can help them with.
Yeah.
So it sounds like from a sort of product standpoint, and maybe this is the wrong contrast to use, but where something like, let's say, an Infusionsoft sort of starts as a marketing system and they've bolted a CRM system onto it that I don't think most of their customers uses, is you start with the CRM system, you've bolted on some marketing automation and lead management tools onto Sales Nexus.
Yeah, that's actually a great analogy.
Okay, all right.
So a a traditional sales organization that wants to start managing leads, maybe they're spending a lot more money on driving traffic to the website and they need a way to manage that flow of leads. Our solution's a great fit for them. If you told me you were a pure e-commerce business that maybe had a couple or a small handful of inside salespeople, then Infusionsoft's probably a great answer.
Got it.
Right.
So you emphasize a lot in what you write about process. So how do you overlay a process onto CRM system?
Well, the hard part is just figuring out what the process is, right? Most of the customers that we talk to just really don't know what their process is. Part of it is just it's hard for anyone to take what they do all day, every day, and look at it objectively, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And salespeople have the same struggle. But once you do, and again, we try to help our customers with that. Once you identify what the process is, it's really not that hard. I mean, you and I know that there's specific points in the process that you just have to measure, right? Leads coming in, and then how many of them are qualified, and then every business has some process they go through, some dance that they do, it might be I qualify you, and then I do a demo, and then I send you a proposal or something else like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we want to measure, though, how many of the leads make it to each of those steps. How long do they stay there? How many conversations do we have as they move through each of those phases and things like that? Setting that up in a CRM, really, frankly, in just about any CRM, is not that hard. It's really figuring out what are those steps and how am I going to measure them, and then back to what we were talking about before. Am I going to be able to tell my salespeople that they have to put that in the system when it happens?
You're right. Well, one of the things that I get a sense from what you talk about, what you write about, and so on, is that's something I wholeheartedly advocate, is don't complicate things. When you're putting your process into your CRM system, especially if you're a small company, mid-sized company, is don't overcomplicate it. Keep it simple and direct.
Right. Yeah. Keep it as simple as you can. Again, most sales managers, most business owners, they've never done this before, right?
No. Well, they don't. They assume it's happening. That's
what
I find with most business owners. Sales, I just assume that's happening.
Right. They're out. They just do what they do. So you can't. I think it would be much better to pick one thing and just start measuring that and see what happens.
And so what do you advocate, sir, that first thing? I mean, I know what I would choose. What would you choose as that first thing?
Well, it kind of depends on the business, but I mean, for a lot of sales organizations, it's just how many leads are we qualifying, right? And do we know what qualified means, right? Mm-hmm. Just get that figured out. And from that, all sorts of other key ingredients to the process will start to appear, right? Once I know what a qualified lead is, then I'll start to realize, I've got, half of my sales team is forecasting big sales with customers who are not qualified, and so
shocking.
That just sort of leads to more things to measure.
Yeah, that's shocking. When I work with a smaller company and they get on a CRM system and they've got the ability to start measuring, how they're effective or efficient their process is is, I love to start with something really simple, which is like, okay, how long does it take you to respond to a lead?
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to start with one of those basic behaviors that you can actually control. Now that you've got a tool to be able to do that, is to help people see what the importance of, because they begin to see very quickly the importance of
Right.
being very responsive in their sales. But
So,
along with you say, it just keeps it's a nice simple measure, and it has ramifications throughout the entire sales process.
yeah, absolutely. And you and I know that most people have no idea how fast they need to be with that. So it cracks me up every time I ask a customer about that. They'll say sort of proudly, right? Well, we usually get to them within 24 to 48 hours.
Yeah, I know. I laugh because I wrote about this with gave some examples once. This is several years ago, about a company that proudly trumpeted on their TV ads that we guarantee we'll get back to you within. If you call and we can't answer, we guarantee we'll get back to you within 24 hours. And I was thinking, really, you're proud of that? What you're doing? And it was a pest control company, and when I had an issue and I had ants invading my home, I was calling a pest control company. Actually, I started with them because they were first on the list on the search returns. And that's the message I got on the phone. I got it. And it's like, well, that's not very good, especially in this business, right? I mean, people only call when they've got urgent problems. And I don't call and say I think I'm going to have ants in a week. I've got ants now. Come help me. So I called the next person on the list, the next company on the list.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it was true years ago when we used the yellow pages to find a pest control company, right? But it's a million times more true now that we use the internet, because it's, I'm going to do my search for pest control and I'm going to go to the first site, and they got probably 5 minutes to start helping me, or I'm on their competitor site.
Right. So you had mentioned briefly that your ideal clients are of 10 to 100 sales reps?
Yeah. Yeah.
And primarily business to business, business to consumer, both? I mean, how's that sort of break out for you?
B2B, so we do work with some real estate firms and insurance firms and mortgage brokers and things like that, who are really more consumer oriented, but for the most part, it's B2B.
Okay, cool. So Craig, we move into the last segment of the show where I've got some standard questions I ask all my guests. And the first one is a hypothetical scenario in which you, Craig, have just been hired as VP of sales at a company whose sales have stalled. And you, as CEO, are anxious for that to get turned around quickly, or the CEO is anxious for that to get turned around quickly. So what two things could you do your first week on the job as sales leader, VP for this company? What two things could you do the first week on the job that have the biggest impact?
Two things. Well, I think the first one would be, get out and meet some clients somehow or another. Depending, might be go see my biggest client, go right along with a salesperson, or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then the other one would be, I would want to see what sort of process they have in place, and maybe in a lot of organizations, the most straightforward way to do that would be, show me the report that you're looking at every week that tells you what's going on with sales, right? So that I can see what they're measuring, what they're keeping their eyes on,
mm-hmm.
and then and at that point you're going to know, how much process is there, and hopefully maybe where are some of the bottlenecks in the process. Because to me that would be the biggest variable would be, do we have to start at ground zero building a process, or do we have a process that just needs to be optimized?
That's really an interesting point about looking at the reports and the dashboards that exist, because, I've found that in several companies that have been called in to help out that they were just looking at the wrong information.
Yeah. Well, they're looking at sales, right?
Well, they were looking at things that really didn't have an impact on improving the outcomes, which it's surprising, right? It's they're managing or focused on purely outcomes and not managing the process.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Which is, and the unfortunate thing is, one of the greatest challenges that businesses face in scaling up their business and their sales team is hiring and onboarding new reps, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what kills a new rep, right? Is there's no cookbook, It's just, here's your desk, here's your phone, here's your customer list. Keep an eye on what Sam does over there because he's really good. He always hits his numbers. And good luck.
Oh, yeah. And on top of that, especially in smaller, mid-sized organizations, is, the new person coming in also finds that all the good accounts are allocated to everybody else in sort of a disproportionate fashion, oftentimes based on their seniority. And so then the new person never has a chance to get an account that, they can see what they're doing, how they're succeeding with it, that they can build off of.
Or even an objective sort of picture or criteria to let them know what makes a great account.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So now that's a good answer. So let's move into the last few questions. Is you can give me one-word answers, or you can elaborate if you wish. The first one is, when you, Craig, are out selling Sales Nexus' service, what's your most powerful sales attribute?
You mean personally or
personally? When you personally are out selling.
Oh, well, for sure. I've always made good questions and listening the foundation of my success. That served me well in all aspects of my life, and so really today at Sales Nexus, that's what I try to share with my employees, with my customers. Really, when I'm working with customers and implementing our system, one of the things that I'm talking about with them is how are we going to set the CRM up so that it sort of gives the salespeople a script of what questions to ask. And I'm not talking about data points like, how many of these do you have, but more probing questions that really get at the heart of things.
Mm-hmm.
And how's management going to measure and manage the salespeople through the lens of, who's really good at really understanding the customer and listening and having empathy and being able to sit down in the conference room with the team when we're strategizing and saying, what really matters to this account is this,
Right. Well, I think for people listening in the audience today is, be sure to go to Craig's website. He's written a blog about exercises you can use to develop sort of that questioning muscle and developing empathy with customers, or demonstrating empathy with customers. That's a good read. So I'd urge people to go there and check that out. So next question is, who's your sales role model?
That is a great question. I would say that if I had to pick one person, it would have to be Dave Blanchard, who is the empathy master. He's the Jedi master of empathy and asking questions. If you've ever heard of the book, The Greatest Salesman in the World, it's written by Og Mandino.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So Dave, somehow or another, met Og Mandino's widow, and long story short, ended up managing the franchise for her, and he's turned it into this whole coaching franchise and everything, which I've had the benefit of going through some of his coaching. And he's written several books himself, all about how to really empathize with other people. And, you can sit down with Dave, and he will sell you something, but you won't know you were sold anything. In fact, you'll feel like you just went to a religious ceremony.
Right. Interesting. Okay. So what's one book you would recommend every salesperson read?
Well, The Greatest Salesman in the World, for sure, because it's not really just a sales book. It's such a parable about life.
Right.
And it's a short, easy read too.
Yeah, it's a good book.
And I would recommend Dave's book too. Today I Begin a New Life. It's a great book.
By Dave Blanchard. Today I Begin a New Life. Okay, good. Yeah, that's a new one for me. I'll check that one out. So last question for you is what music's on your playlist these days?
That's a good one too. I've been listening to a lot of Ray LaMontagne. In fact, I have tickets to go to a show here coming up in a couple of months.
Nice. Okay.
And I took my son to see Muse here not too long ago when they were in Houston, and so I've been listening to them a lot as well.
Excellent. All right. Well, that's both good stuff. All right. Well, Craig, thanks for joining me today, and tell folks how they can find out more about Sales Nexus.
Sure, of course, salesnexus.com. And, we've got, you can take a look at a video and see how the system works and start a free trial and use it for a month and see how you like it.
Yeah, and a lot of good blog posts that also have videos in them to help you understand how you might implement process into a CRM system and so on. So it's a good resource for people to check out. Well, thanks again for being on the show. And remember, friends, make it a part of your day every day to deliberately learn something new to help you accelerate your success. And easy way to do that is to make this podcast accelerate a part of your morning routine, whether you listen to the commute, in the gym, or make it part of your morning sales meeting. That way you won't miss any of my conversations with top business experts like my guest today, Craig Klein, who shared his expertise about how to accelerate the growth of your sales. So thanks for joining me. Until next time, this is Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone. Thanks for listening to the show. If you like what you heard and want to make sure you don't miss any upcoming episodes, please subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or Stitcher.com. For more information about today's guest, visit my website at andypaul.com.